Hey everybody, happy Thursday. I just realized something today, and that is I'm showing the slideshows this week that were scheduled for next week. So when I said we were going to talk about the Gilded Age, we're just going to have to go back in time next week, and then we'll fast forward through time. We'll chalk it up to Memorial Day brain. Okay, so anyway, today we're going to be talking about immigration in the late 1800s. Let me get my slideshow going here. In the 1890s, 3.5 million immigrants, mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, arrived in America, and they were viewed as inferior by native born Americans and as a danger to democracy. This is a theme that obviously is used over and over in America's history, including now. It really doesn't matter where immigrants are coming from. A lot of times, Americans, not myself, view them as being a threat to America. When in reality, the more diversity we have in our country, the better our country has been. So there are some restrictions that were developed to try and prevent immigrants from coming. The new immigration produced a resurgence of racial nationalism in the United States. Meaning, again, it's we see this a lot today in America, where it's, go America, but anybody who's different we don't want here, which is exactly the opposite of what America stands for. Restricting immigration was widely seen as a way to determine who could and should be an American. The Immigration Restriction League blamed new immigrants, quote unquote new immigrants, for national problems. So this league called for reducing immigration by barring the illiterate from entering the United States. Northern and Western states experimented with ways to eliminate undesirable voters. So this is actually a test here, a primary source that was given to new immigrants. So for example, on the left page here, we've got a person who was wanting to immigrate to the state of West Virginia. And then after that, they were wanting to move beyond West Virginia. And so here you've got questions that they're supposed to check if it relates to them. So for example, so they're trying to say, we want to become these things. And it's just kind of read over this for a second. And it's really, kind of disturbing what they're asking. On the right-hand side, it's scored here. This is for a person who was trying to get to Kansas. And yeah, just kind of disturbing what was asked of them to fill out. Now, during the 1800s, a lot of Chinese immigrants came, especially to the Western United States, to help with like expansion of the railroad, with mining and what have you. And so this is a timeline of Chinese immigration and eventually exclusion from the United States. 1842, China lost the first Opium War to Britain, and the Qing dynasty signed a treaty favorable to British trade interest and ceded Hong Kong Island to the British Empire. Then a few years after that, gold is discovered in California. And so now many Chinese who were suffering economically back home are going to take a chance out in California to try and raise money. In 1850, because so many people came from China at that time, California instituted the foreign miners tax, which targeted Chinese and Latino miners. At the same time in that year, there was a civil war that happened in China. 20 to 30 million died as a result, and millions more were displaced by its end in 1863. So people were left without homes, without their jobs to go to. And as a direct result of that, 2 years later, we're getting now 17,000 to 25,000 Chinese that are now living in California because there was opportunities there. So in 1854, the California Supreme Court ruled that the Chinese did not have the right to testify against white citizens and people versus Hall, which basically, again, anytime like we saw last week, that you take away the right for someone to do something, in this case, testify, you're lessening their standing in the eyes of the court and the people who live there, which goes against the Constitution. By 1860, the United States trade with China had tripled from 1845 levels. There was a second Opium War that China lost to France and Britain. The same dynasty, the Qing dynasty, and signed a treaty favorable to Western interests, including the legalization of the opium trade. And then in 1865, the Central Pacific Railroad needed workers and imported a lot of immigrants to help work the railroad. So really, it was kind of a love-hate relationship with immigrants coming from China. California didn't have enough population to do a lot of these things. And so they are welcoming immigrants, but at the same time, they don't want them to take all the money from these opportunities. 1868, China and the US signed the Burlingame Treaty. It guaranteed Chinese immigration to the US, protection of Chinese citizens, and helped US trade interests to China. 1 year later, exactly, the first transcontinental railroad was completed. 2 years after that, 3 years after that, a white mob tortured and hanged 17 to 20 Chinese in Los Angeles. So you get the idea here. It's the same back and forth between we want you here, we need you here, to we don't want you taking all the riches and all the jobs and things. That leads to racism, that leads to the same pattern of behavior. So fast forward to the very last bottom thing where it says Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882 restricted Chinese immigration. In 1 year, this is what's ridiculous. In 1 year, the new number of lawfully admitted Chinese immigrants dropped from 40,000 to 23 with no good reason. So that's a moment in history to be ashamed of. So it's the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 that barred the Chinese from the United States. And the Chinese already living here start suffering discrimination and violence. They were before, but it's getting way, way, way worse. So here's another primary source, this time from a newspaper. And it says it's the full text of the anti-Chinese bill signed May 8th, 1882. An act to execute certain treaty stipulations relating to Chinese. Whereas, in the opinion of the government of the United States, the coming of Chinese laborers to this country endangers the good order of certain localities within the territory thereof. Therefore, be it enacted, etc., that from and after the expiration of 90 days next after the passage of this act, and until the expiration of 10 years next after the passage of this act, the coming of the Chinese laborers to the United States, and unfortunately that little bomb section is, I can't see it right now, so you're just gonna have to read that. So yeah, there you go. Sorry, we don't want you here. Another shameful act. So that's all we're going to go over today. I've got some videos from Edpuzzle today, and what we'll do is we'll finish up next Monday with this part 4 section, and then we'll go back in time to the Gilded Age and go back and do that. So I hope you all have a great weekend, and I will catch you next time.